Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. So today we're going to do a little bit of a weekend review and maybe some deep dives on the newer, bigger releases. And then we'll talk about what's coming up for this week. So the numbers just came in this morning. These are the weekend estimates for the weekend of September 29th through today, October 1st. Obviously, the Friday, Saturday numbers are exactly what happened. The Sunday numbers are a little bit of an extrapolation, a little bit of a guess, if you will, but they're usually very accurate, probably within about 90% accuracy for the most part, usually. So let's just start with it. Kind of a little bit of surprise. I was not great at predicting this weekend outside of Flatliners. So number one this weekend was It. Coming in at 17.3 million is the current estimate. A lovely 42% drop, which I find that's just so surprising to me. Like, it was doing 50% drops, which was already pretty surprising, and now the fact that it's dropped down to a 42% drop just suggests that like it is not going to go away, and it's going to play well probably through Halloween, which is really just bonkers when you think about it. It already broke all these records. It's already probably one of the biggest, if not biggest, horror movie of all time. That all depends on how you define a horror movie, and that's like is Sixth Sense a horror movie? Is Jaws a horror movie? Stuff like that. And so essentially it is extending its historic run now, and kind of surprising us even in its later weeks. I can't see it really fading away until November, to be honest with you, until we get past Halloween. Still on about 4,000 screens, so it's super saturated. Only lost about 90 screens this weekend. Per theater average this weekend was about $4,400. Total gross so far is $291 million. So now it's already past, like, I'm trying to think of like the biggest horror movies. I think Sixth Sense, I gotta look that one up, but I think it was in the 200s. What was the one? Oh, I Am Legend with Will Smith. That was kind of another like super huge quote unquote horror movie. It's gonna blow past those now. Now it's in its sort of its own world and its own realm. Not to mention that Sixth Sense wasn't rated R. I don't think. I Am Legend wasn't rated R. I know it wasn't. I think it was PG-13. It was a hard rated R movie with graphic violence, even depicted against children. So it's an outlier in so many different levels. And it's really interesting just to see that its drops start to drop. Like, this one is not going to play like a normal horror film on any level. But mostly it's not going to have those 60-70% drops that we're used to seeing for movies like that. It's not going to happen here. So 17.3 million is the estimate. Could go up or down from that, but it's probably going to be right around there. So that was number one this weekend. Keep in mind that it only had a production budget of $35 million. Then in number two this weekend, and this one was a surprise to me, just because I had predicted it. I'm trying to look back at what I said. I said a lot lower. I said $11.7 million for American Made. I think I did. I have to double check. I was wrong. It actually played a lot better than expected. When the Thursday preview numbers came in, it was just below $1 million in the 900K range. That suggested, okay, it's not going to super flop. It's probably not going to super break out either. It's playing for the mid-teens. I think Hollywood Reporter put it at $16 million. Variety put it into the mid to low teens. So it kind of overperformed my expectations significantly. I was going to say about 12 million. And it overperformed the expectations of Variety, and just a little bit on Hollywood Reporter, who had it at 16. I don't know. This one's fascinating because when you looked at those preview numbers, it said about $15 million, maybe $14 million. But something happened from the previews until the Saturday and now the Sunday numbers, right? What they're seeing, I'm suspecting what they're seeing is that it's playing a lot better than they thought it was going to on the Friday that the numbers started rolling in. I think I made about 6 million on Friday, just over 6 million. Even with that, within Friday numbers, it started out at about 5.5 with the matinees. And then as the night wore on, the day wore on, it got jumped up to 6, and now it's up to 17 total for the weekend. So what you were seeing is that the numbers were shifting towards the positive as the weekend was playing out. What that suggests is that you have good word of mouth, and that it wasn't really front loaded at all. It wasn't a movie that people were going to rush out to see Thursday night. It was going to have a more of a sort of flat line level weekend, which I think is a good thing for this movie, because this is definitely a long play movie. If this film wants to make the maximum amount of money it can make, it needs to have super, super long legs, right? It could happen. It was on 3,000 screens, did about 5,600 per screen this weekend, or per theater, I should say. Budget was $50 million. Interesting when you compare that to It, which was $35 million. This movie it needs to play forever, right? It needs to sort of stick to sub 50 drops, and as long as it can stay in the theater. It's going to be tough. It's a crowded October. We got Blade Runner coming out. Then we have a couple horror movies coming out. It's going to be a little dicey, I think, for it. But what I think has it going for it, and one thing I didn't really consider when sort of guessing it was going to do about $12 million this weekend, I kind of felt like it was a Narcos ripoff. It still feels like that a little bit. Not necessarily a bad thing. People really love that show. But I think the fact that Tom Cruise is sort of, I think, a draw here, much more than he was, say, in The Mummy or anything like that, right? Like in those films, it felt like a little bit over the top. It felt like a cookie cutter like action adventure movie. This one has a little bit more edge to it, and he plays a little bit more of a morally gray person, maybe like even like an anti-hero on some level. So I think that helped draw people in a little bit. It didn't seem boring or bland. It seemed like an interesting character. The quality, I think, is honestly helping. On Metacritic, it's only sitting at a 65, I think. But on Rotten Tomatoes, it's on an 87, right? So that's fantastic. That's a really good score on 176 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. That's the critic score of an 87, which is obviously fresh. Audience score is an 81%. Which is not as good, but audiences obviously enjoyed it. Cinema score's coming in at a B+, which is okay. So that to me makes me think that the legs are going to be okay, but they're not going to be fantastic. So it overperformed a little bit at 17 this weekend. So let's assume, just because of the nature of the film and what it is, and the fact that word of mouth is probably going to be decent, not amazing, but decent. Let's assume a 3x multiplier. You're hoping that it legs it out to 50. And that would be, I think, a pretty big win for this film. I don't know how the numbers work out on the back end overall. I think a 50 million budget for this movie was way too high. You'd want to be in probably the 30 range, maybe push 40. 50 is pretty high. So the cost to release this are going to be pretty high. The marketing campaign felt like it was more of a social media campaign than a traditional campaign. So maybe they saved some money on that. But I think all things considered, when you look in the context of when it was coming out, what it was, who was in it, I think if it hits $50 million in the United States, I would call it at least a contextual win, if that makes sense. I have no idea if it's going to make money, right? Like, I don't know what it's going to do foreign wise. I think it's done about 60 million total worldwide outside of the US. So let's say, I don't know, it's probably got to get released more places. $50 million. Usually for a film like this, the split might be a little bit less than 50%. Let's just assume it's like 45. It's going to do at least probably 120, 130 worldwide. Let's say it does 130 worldwide. That's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for Universal to really make a lot of money off of it. The ROI, I can tell you right now, is not going to be great. It's not going to be a great ROI. Whether it breaks even or not, it might. You know, when you get VOD and streaming and all that kind of stuff involved, because of Tom Cruise's name, I think they're going to be able to ask for a lot more money from Netflix or Amazon or HBO, just because it's easier to market for them. If it was a kind of a no name with not a lot of like A-list actors, it was just a crime movie. Like, I think it's a lot harder to market and sell sort of to those distributors past the theatrical release. But I think Tom Cruise really helps it out. So yeah, it'll probably break even, but it's just not going to be a huge win. Like, it might be like a single, maybe probably not a double. I would say like a single. So it's definitely a positive outcome from this weekend. But I think all of the negatives for this film may have been baked into it already. You know, at a $50 million budget, you're going to want this thing to open, you know, a lot more than this. You're going to at least a 20, 25 million. It's Tom Cruise. Why don't you open it at 30? I mean, that's my thought process on it, right? Like, but I'm always thinking about like, what's the ROI here? Like, how much am I going to make per dollar per spend, right? And the best movies, they make like what, about $1 per profit, pure profit, or not even. Those are sort of like, I guess, outliers. Something like 50 cents per dollar spent in pure profit, which is honestly really amazing. I don't think American Made's really going to get there. I think it was kind of ill-conceived from the start. It had so much stacked against it, which is why they threw it out here in September. But I think they're making the best out of a not great situation for this film. Despite the fact that it seems like a good movie, I think conception-wise, kind of poorly planned out and poorly executed. Just in terms of like, do people really want this product right now? And the answer is, sort of. And I think that's what that 17 million really says. Now, it could have great legs and go way past 50. I just don't see that happening. It's super busy now, especially with Blade Runner coming out. I don't think the legs are going to go more than 3x from this weekend. So American Made was number 2. Number 3 was Kingsman. I had said Kingsman's going to be number 1 this weekend. I just didn't believe, and it hit right about what I thought it was going to hit. I was like, more than a 50% drop, but less than a 60% drop, probably closer-ish to 60. And it did about a 57% drop. Made just about 17 million bucks. Added some screens. I don't know if those are IMAX or something. 4,038 screens this weekend. Per theater average was 4,200 bucks. Total so far is 66 million. This one's kind of been all over the place. I talked about it a lot last week, but its performance isn't necessarily puzzling. What puzzles me is, why would they spend $100 million to make this, and why would they let the cut be 2 hours and 21 minutes? I don't know. It just doesn't add up to me. And I think Matthew Vaughn, the director, I think he had an original cut that was 4 hours or something like that. The response to this movie has not been fantastic from the critics. 50% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 72% from the audience, which isn't horrific, but again, you look at those numbers, like, it's just not good. It's not great. And so, B+ cinema score. See, that's what really throws me off, is that B+ cinema score. If you combine that B+ cinema score, so that's people who saw it Thursday and Friday, so people who rushed out basically to see it, they were like, it's okay. That 72% audience score, 50% on the critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 44 on Metacritic. It's pretty clear what's happening here, right? You had a kind of surprising success of the first Kingsman. Had a great multiplier, opened pretty well, and it just kept going throughout that year. I guess that was 2015, right around Valentine's Day. I believe, wasn't it? Yeah. Valentine's Day 2015. So that opened up at 36, ended up at 128. Great. You know, over 3x multiplier. And that's why they greenlit this sequel. What I can't understand in the sort of the thought process of producing a sequel, you got all these big names. I mean, you got Halle Berry, you got Colin Firth is back, Julianne Moore, Jeff Bridges, Channing Tatum. This huge crew of people, super long movie. It's massive. It's big. It's rated R. Production budget just over $100 million. The marketing had to be outrageous for this film. I saw it everywhere constantly. So you're looking at least like, God, the United States alone, 50, 60, probably pushing $60 million in marketing just in the US and Canada. That's a really, really big spend. I don't know, if I was a studio making that big of a spend, I would want, I don't know, it feels like they let Matthew Vaughn kind of have the reins a little bit too much here. 2 hours and 21 minutes for a movie like this. And from what I've heard from people who have seen it and like the original, it's a half hour too long, right? So first thing you probably had to do here is cut it down to under 2 hours. Get it at like the 150, an hour and 50 minute mark, somewhere around then. Make it super tight. And I think a lot of things would happen. I think the critic score would go way up. I think the audience score, which would inch up into the 88%, maybe higher. And I think the legs would be a lot better, right? But now what you have now is basically, hey, it's a lot more of the same. And in fact, it's too much more of the same. I kind of got the feeling about that with John Wick 2, by the way. And I love the first one. The second one was just like every 5 minutes was an extended close quarters, like gunfight thing. And I'm just like, I get it. It's cool. It's fun. Give me a little bit more story. This one just felt like it was one set piece after another set piece. And so I think that the story here is just, it was a little bit too much of the same. Maybe even way too much of the same. It's not a flop by any stretch of imagination. It's at $66 million right now. Its multiplier is probably not going to be good. It should have opened a lot higher than the original, right? Like a sequel's got to open significantly higher. I would have wanted this one to be at least in the mid 40s. I would want it to break 50. It didn't do that. And then you have this sort of fatigue aspect going on. So it's not going to hit, it's not going to hit a 3x multiplier. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen at all. At 39, in order to hit the $100 million mark, which you would absolutely want it to hit. I mean, if it doesn't hit that, it could be failure flop territory. Multiply over 2.56. That's not a given right now, right? It's just not. With a 56% drop, it wasn't catastrophic. We weren't in the 60s, but a 56% drop is not good. And there's a lot of competition coming out. So I don't know what we'll keep our eye on this one, but I think the success failure of this one is if it doesn't hit $100 million total. Every indicator says that it probably should and will. 3x multiplier would put it at like about 117, 120. That would definitely be successful. I think, I would hope. But definite flop territory is sub 100. So that's our that's our Mendoza line for Kingsman. We'll keep watching it week in and week out. See if we can hit that $100 million mark. It's still on over 4,000 screens. Its per theater average is not awful. I just get the feeling that it is going to fade away very quickly just because of the poor quality of the film. That's just more sort of my read on it. But it's number 3 this weekend. I thought it was going to be number 1. I was wrong. Number 4 this weekend was Lego Movie, Ninjago. 12 million. Typical children's drop, maybe even on the better side, 41% drop. Still in 4,000 theaters. Per theater average was just shy of 3,000 per theater. Total take so far is $35 million. This is a flop. I mean, this is the textbook flop. I have no idea how much money it cost to make. I know it cost a ton. I mean, an absolute ton to market this thing. I don't even know if it's going to match the opening weekend of Lego Batman. So it opened at what, 20? Oh, it should easily get to 60, I would hope, with because it's going to have the small drops because it's a children's film. There's not a lot of kids films out there right now. So I would expect it to easily make 60. But keep in mind, Lego Batman opened at 53, right? So this is definitely a huge disappointment to Warner Brothers. Lego Batman opened at 53, ended at 175. This will struggle to make it to 75 total. So you're talking $100 million off of the last movie, which opened 6 months ago. And then almost 200, a little bit less than 200 off of 200 million, that is, off of the Lego movie. Of course, it wasn't expected to do what the Lego movie did. I think the expectation was maybe that it would easily break 100. I think the sort of success line to them was probably 125, 130. That's just not going to happen. Like, it need a 5x multiplier to get to 100 million, which is pretty fucking rare, right? Even if it's a children's film, I don't really see that happening. So like, I think 75 is where it's going to get. So it's probably 50, $60 million off. They're sort of like, oh, that was a success, right? So it's a total flop. They're going to lose a lot of money off of it. Maybe not like overall when you do all the product stuff in there. But this is one thing I always say about when people bring up merchandising with a movie. It's not like merchandise is made for free. Like, it's another business. It has all of these costs associated with it. Just because a movie is marketing a product doesn't mean that product sales are pure profit. Like, that's just not how it works, right? Like, let's say Lego sells all of these. I'm sure they're making a profit on the merchandise, but if let's say it sells, I don't know, $30 million, $20 million in Ninjago movie merchandise, like actual Legos, right? Well, that's just, to them, that's just marketing, right? Like, there's still a cost to make those goods, to ship those goods, and the middleman costs, like, there's cost of goods sold involved. So it's not like, oh, they just made another $30 million on merchandise. No, like, their profit margin's probably at least 50%. So yeah, they made like $15 million off of it. I just don't like it when this always happens when you're talking about the box office, especially with IP, DC, Marvel, and the Lego stuff, and children's films in particular. If a film doesn't do well, there's always this rote response, oh, well, it'll make it up on the back end. That's not how things work. That's not reality, right? If it's so plain as day, but I think people just use that as a response because either they're defensive or they don't understand how businesses run or work. If Lego Ninjago movie was supposed to make $125 million in revenue, right? And let's say the studio gets half of that, which would be about what? Let's say, 75, not even 75. Let's say it's like 65 million bucks. It was supposed to make in revenue. And now it's only going to do at best maybe 75. It's going to be $30 million off in revenue. $30 million just missing, right? Like, you don't make that up. Like, that's just gone. And I think that's why the movies are so fascinating. It's because businesses and companies and careers live and die off the performance of these movies. And people throw out terms like, oh, Hollywood accounting, blah, 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 blah. There's money being transferred here. Like, it's not like that $30 million can just be printed somewhere. And so that's why I know it's always a strange response to me when a movie does poorly and people make excuses for it. At the end of the day, the product is a failure, right? The only reason why Warner Brothers isn't going to cry themselves to sleep over this is because they make a lot of movies, and some of them do very, very well, and they make $200 million in profit. And so it's not the end of the world to them, but it is the nature of the business. You have big winners and big losers, and there's not a lot in between. And then Django movie is probably going to be a big loser. You know, it's not going to make anywhere near what the expectation of what they wanted it to make. And, you know, some people are probably going to lose their jobs over it because they went all in on this idea. And Django's, oh, you know, I can imagine like there had to be 100 meetings about this, pitching this movie before it even started. Oh, we should do this. We should do a movie on this one, you know, Batman. You know, like that's, you know, those people are probably going to be around for a long time. A loss like that, and Hollywood is definitely an old boys club where they, you know, everybody, to some sense, some people fail up, like any industry. But someone's going to get fired, right? Even if it's not the executive producer, somebody down the line is going to get let go. I know the reason I rant about that and say that is the economics are people's lives at the end of the day. And it's not like the money, as much as money is this made up thing that, you know, doesn't have any real true value. It ends up having a value in our society that is important. And a film or a product that essentially loses $30 million from expected revenue, that's a huge fucking deal. Like, it's a massive deal that will affect a lot of people. And so I don't know. I always like to put it with things within context. And I also don't. The box office world and Hollywood world is one of those things where a lot of people are fascinated by it, and a lot of people are interested in it. That sometimes lends itself to very shallow readings of what's happening because somebody likes a movie, they like a studio. You know, everybody's got sort of an opinion on that sort of stuff. But when you look at the sort of the nuts and bolts of it and the nitty-gritty details, at the end of the day, it's a business. And it lives and dies on its revenue and its profit. And a movie like Lego Ninjago is a loss. And you can't really paint it any other way, right? There's no Hollywood accounting that's going to make that loss go away. There's no amount of merchandise that's going to be like, oh, this is great now. You know, because the toy company expected that $30 million of merchandise to be there, right? It's not like they don't think about that. But in any event, there's my business rant and my numbers are money's real and everything and nothing at the same time spiel. But I think it's a big flop. Maybe not like a massive flop. On a scale of floppage, it's definitely on a scale of 1 to 10. I'd put like a 6 or a 7. It's pretty bad. And I don't think the Lego movie franchise is really gonna thrive anymore. I think the sequel will do okay to the Lego movie, but there's the one-off movies I think are over now. And that's sort of the reality based on the performance of Lego Ninjago. Okay, let's go on. Number 5, speaking of flops from Sony, who's having a terrible few years. Flatliners, the remake, made 6.7, even below what I thought it was going to make. 2,500 screens. Per theater average was $2,600. $19 million. Sony Screen Gems film. Not the end of the world. In terms of losses, you know, they probably, I don't even know how much they spent on marketing. Probably not very much. I mean, but not very much. I'm probably like $30 million or like $25 million. Definitely social media heavy marketing on this one. Nobody wanted this film. It was 0 on Rotten Tomatoes for a while. I wonder if it still is. Still is 0 on Rotten Tomatoes. You know what's fascinating about it too is I feel like because Sony wouldn't release or allow critics to review the movie, they basically put an embargo on their film. I think critics responded by saying, I'm just not going to see it then or review it. It's sitting at 0% Rotten Tomatoes, only on 36 reviews. Usually a movie has like 160 reviews going into by the end of the opening weekend. So it sounds like critics just said, no, we're not even going to look at this movie. We're not going to waste our time with it. Audiences felt the same way, 43%. Cinema score is a B-, which isn't horrific for a horror film, but it's certainly not great. You know, I don't know what happened here. I think it just became, you know, they were looking for something to do. Flatliners came out in 1990, had a lot of big stars. It's never been considered to be a good film by any stretch of imagination. But they felt like, oh, here's this idea that we've done before. Like, we can take this and repackage it. It's already written to some degree. There'll be some cultural recognition of this film by people who are maybe a little bit older. So it's not like we're marketing it from fresh. People will be reminded of the old film. The cast was just strange. I don't know what Ellen Page is doing in this film. It doesn't make any sense. It felt like maybe it was even shot a couple of years ago and they just had it on the shelf or something. It just did not make any sense to release this film now. We're in October now, so they're thinking, oh, let's get the horror audience. But it came out, Mother came out, like, it's already late to the show in terms of Halloween 2017. And we got I think 3 more horror movies coming out. So there was just nobody wanted to see this movie. I like the original. I think the original is awesome. Kind of in a kitschy, fun, ironic way, but it is kind of an interesting film and it's a very interesting idea. But with this one, I think I saw the trailer once or twice without looking for it. A lot of social media ads on Twitter and Instagram this last week just didn't pay off. I think at the end of the day, it was just very poorly executed. I don't even think it was a bad idea necessarily. I think it is kind of a better movie to reboot just because the original was fascinating but not well done. And I think they had a chance to really make a good movie and they just failed horribly. And then they failed to market it well and it became a total mess. So Flatliners, definitely a big flop, but no one's going to lose a lot of money off of it because they knew that going into it opening, so they didn't spend a lot of money on it over the last couple of weeks. Let's see what else is going on. Number 6 was Battle of the Sexes, expanded wide on 1,200 screens now, or 1,200 theaters. 3.4 million. Per theater average was $2,800. Total so far is 4 million. What to say about this one? All right, so Flatliners did 6.7 on about 2,500 screens. Its per theater average was 2,600. Battle of the Sexes is only $200 more per theater. Like, I called this, and like, I don't understand why people. I don't know. I got into like fights about this online with people. I don't know why. Like, it's so stupid. Battle of the Sexes is an art house film. It's Fox Searchlight. Don't let anybody tell you any differently. Like, it was meant for art house audiences and more urban cosmopolitan audiences. When it got released into those areas on 20 screens, I believe its per theater average was $25,000. That to me is DOA territory, right? If you can't play a film well to those people, I mean, there are some exceptions to this. If you can't play a film well to those people who it's tailored for, and then you try to expand it wide, you're fucked. Like, very rarely, I think maybe like American Sniper is the one that comes to mind, where wouldn't play well in New York and Los Angeles, but played very well outside in middle America, right? Usually it's the reverse. It has to just absolutely do amazingly well in those cultural centers of the country, and then it permeates out, and it's all like, how long can it hold on before it hits that wall of just like cultural apathy and ignorance? You know what I mean? It's just like, here's a really amazing film that's really entertaining, really well done. When's it going to hit that wall? And it's like, it's so funny to like watch it happen. Steve Jobs is the perfect example of it. Here you have a movie, Steve Jobs, I think it made $130K per theater on its opening weekend. It's probably only like 5 theaters, but that's a very, very high amount. And it suggests a pretty darn fantastic performance as it expands out. But that one hit a brick wall when it expanded wide. And so did Battle of the Sexes. Why did that happen? I don't know, but I could tell that it was happening based on his performance on just 20 theaters. Because if you're not hitting home runs there's no way you're gonna hit a home run in like Milwaukee or like Portland, or it's just not gonna happen. And so I don't know what happened there. I think ultimately the story didn't connect with people. Now I'm realizing why Emma Roberts was on SNL last night, because Ryan Gosling was there promoting Blade Runner. He was kind of doing a parody of his La La Land character, and then Emma Stone shows up, and it's like, oh yeah, like she's probably, I mean, obviously she did it because he was there, but she probably also wants to kind of get her face out there, and because Battle of the Sexes is expanding wide this weekend, or maybe not, maybe it's just a coincidence. I think the marketing for this was fantastic. I want to see it. Maybe I'll go see it this afternoon. I don't know. I think it's playing here. It must be. I think, I don't know. I'm not sure why this one did not connect with, even like cosmopolitan art house audiences and middle America audiences. Just didn't connect with either. I think it maybe just the subject matter, and I think also that was a big sort of historical event, I think, for people who are older. I would say for me, I vaguely remember hearing about it, but you grew up with hearing about it, like this, the battle between a man and a woman in tennis. Like, it was just sort of this cultural touchstone. I don't think that it is more for people. I'm 35, so I don't think it really is more for people probably under the age of 30, or maybe even my age. Like, I think not many people my age sort of remember this. So maybe that was the big problem, just a disconnect on the cultural history. Like, they thought it was going to be a big deal with a lot of people because they remember it, but nobody really remembers it that well who's younger. So that's maybe why it didn't play so well. And maybe older audiences didn't show up just because they lived through it and saw it. It's like, why the hell would I want to see a movie about something that I lived through and saw firsthand? Like, it's just like one of those things. So I don't know. It does seem like a very good movie though. And maybe it'll get a couple award nods, and that'll get people to check it out. I'm more interested in like, oh, this makes a lot more sense. So it was Little Miss Sunshine, the director of that, which is the first thing I thought of when I saw this movie. It was like, it's Fox Searchlight. It's like Steve Carell. I was like, oh, it's like the Little Miss Sunshine crew getting back together. They also did another movie, Ruby Sparks, which I don't think anybody saw. Came out in 2012. So kind of a bad performance. Not a good performance at all. It's not going anywhere. Is it going to lose a lot of money? I don't know. Like, based on like Big Six performance, where they spent like $25 million on marketing for that. Also to note, there was a Good Hollywood Reporter article that talked about indie films, and it talked about Entertainment Studios, the vaguely titled new distribution company that put out Friend Request. I believe they spent $22 million promoting and marketing Friend Request. Like, what the fuck were they thinking? They spent $30 million on 47 Meters Down. I don't know how these companies make money. It doesn't make any sense to me sometimes. It's just like mind-boggling. They didn't really seem that upset about spending that much money either. I'd be like, dude, Friend Request, it's made $3.5 million in US. They see what, half of that? Where's the rest of the money, man? Doesn't make any sense. So I don't know. Battle of the Sexes, I think it's definitely a disappointment for Fox Searchlight. I think a pretty big disappointment. And they might probably lose not a huge amount of money, but definitely a significant chunk. Maybe 10, 20 million bucks might be down the drain on that one. Okay, number 7, American Assassin, 3.3 million. Decent 47% drop. Still on 3,000 theaters. Hitting the below, technically the Mendoza line is said to be about 2,000 per theater. I don't really agree with that. I think it's lower. I think the Mendoza line, what I mean by that is like the moment a movie stops being attractive to a distributor or theater to have any of their screens devoted to. I say it's more like $1,000, $1,000 per theater. Once you get down to that, it's different for specialty and limited runs. Like Battle of the Sexes 2,800, that's terrible. Like, that thing needed to be at like 4 or 5. Once that hits below 2,000, it's game over because they don't see any audience for it. Bigger movies, I think, what more wider releases get a little bit more leeway. In American Assassins at that $1,000 mark, once it goes below that, they'll start dropping screens left and right pretty rapidly. Total so far is $31 million. I don't know. I feel like that should have done better than that. $31 million for American Assassin. You had what's his name in it, Michael Keaton, and you know, had a cool kind of against the terrorist revenge plot bullshit. You know, it's like whatever. It seems like a decent action movie. It's Lionsgate. Their head's so far up their ass half the time they don't know how to market anything. So, and everything Lionsgate does feels cheap. I don't know why that is, but there's just like this cheapness that permeates their brand. They need to hire somebody to fix that, because like, you know, you talk about like Warner Brothers is different, like Fox or Universal, you know, any of their marketing or the stuff that they put out, at least it has a polish to it. Lionsgate sometimes just feels like it's just this cheap knockoff studio. And there's no reason for them to be that way. You know, someone like A24, which is a fraction of the business that they do, they look super polished. They look even more polished than like Fox or Universal with their marketing. So there's no real excuse for that. And I think American Assassin is sort of an extension of that. It's like, why isn't this not doing $50 million in the US? It should have. Its budget was $33 million. That's a significant budget. Like, I don't know. So I think it's not a huge flop, but not a definitely underperformer for American Assassin overall. Number 8 was Home Again. Reese Witherspoon rom-com, Open Road Films, which was bought by a Chinese company. We're not sure if it even really exists anymore. 1.7 million on the weekend, 46% drop. Definitely below the Mendoza line. $741 per theater this weekend. Total so far, just about $25 million. Not a fantastic performance. I thought it could have done a lot better. Budget was only $12 million, so it's not like a huge loss. It's Open Road Film, so it's like I'm surprised it even got released, to be honest with you, the way that company is just imploded. So that was number 8 this weekend. Not a great performance for Reese Witherspoon. I hope she has some other good movies coming out. I feel like her career's in a weird spot. So she did really well, Little Big Lies. That did very well at the Emmys, which didn't make any sense to me. It's like, I wish I should have a TV show probably too, or podcasts. Just a quick little side rant on that. We are in peak TV, golden age TV. I think everybody realizes this. It's like from The Sopranos and 6 Feet Under on, TV has very much changed. It is now the predominantly sort of high narrative art in American culture. I think it's more important than film overall, and just in terms of what's happening with it right now. And it's like, so the Emmys should be a celebration of that. Like, it's like, this is the best TV that's ever been made ever, hands down. Like, nothing even comes close to the quality of the narrative art coming out of the TV world. And then they choose to celebrate something like Little Big Lies. Look, it's not a terrible show by any stretch of imagination, but in terms of TV overall, it's definitely tier B. I would say it's probably even tier C, just because the writing was very, very poor. The acting was fantastic. The way it was shot was fantastic. But narrative art is at its core about writing. And it just didn't click. It was trashy. Everything about it felt trashy. It kind of reminded me of Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan, where it's this really beautifully wrapped sort of empty box, right? Like, it's so well done in terms of the cinematography, the music, the sound editing, and the acting, but at the core, it's just this really scummy story. And I think that's what Little Big Lies really is at the end of the day. I watched the whole thing, so it's not like I'm just making shit up. I also watched all of Leftovers, and I'm not going to get into that. But there's so much amazing TV coming out right now. I wouldn't put Little Big Lies in the top 30 of shows that I've seen in the last year. Not even close. The fact that Westworld, for some of its flaws, to me, was by far the best season of TV I saw last year. Really, I think, in a lot of ways, surpassed film, that show, in terms of what you can do on TV and what kind of stories you can tell. And I think more than anything, and this is going to get way into art criticism, but what the limits of a narrative and a story, visual story, are. And I think Westworld really pushed those limits to the point of like, wow, I watched that and like going into the entire show, you're just like, what is going on? I can't understand these two story arcs. And then when it comes together at the end, I was just so blown away by it's not even the cleverness of it. It's just like the wisdom of it. And when I compare that, which I would consider like high art, it's like the Faulkner of TV. Like Little Big Lies is sort of just like, I don't know, it's not Dan Brown level trashy, but it's like, it's not great. You know, it's not something that you need to write like, you know, a thesis paper on, which I think you could on Westworld. End art rant there. The reason I say that is Reese Witherspoon is not doing great in films right now, but she is doing great in TV, getting a lot of accolades for her. She's very good in Little Big Lies, and I will say that. But I want to take a look at her film career recently and see what she's been up to. You know, she did The Voice and Sing. Hot Pursuit did not do well. So she's not really had a hit in film probably since Four Christmases back in 2008. So it's been 10 years since she really had a big film. She's in Downsizing coming out, which looks fantastic, but I don't think it's going to do very, very well. I think her best performance in the last 10 years is easily Wild, which came out in 2014. I mean, what a great movie. If you have not seen Wild, please see Wild. It is so good. But yeah, I mean, did she win the Oscar for Walk the Line? I can't remember. But she had a really strong sort of middle of last decade. You know, Sweet Home Alabama, Walk the Line, and Four Christmases over like a 6-year period. Legally Blonde 2, of course, and Legally Blonde. So she had a very, you know, really strong naughties, if you will. But her teens here, the 20 teens, is just not being great. She's gone down a more arty path, it seems like. And you can see that slowly happen. Like Water for Elephants was a little bit, then Mud. Wild was very arty, I felt like, which is why I loved it. Inherent Vice she was in for a bit, and then she kind of like falls back to what she was doing before in Hot Pursuit. It doesn't work anymore. And Home Again's kind of another little bit of a failure for her. So maybe she does well in Downsizing, but she's in, I think, what my friend who's an actress or an actor, she likes to be called, says there's always this gulf for women. It's like the moment they really can't play the young, hot, beautiful woman anymore, there's like a gulf between that until they can play an older woman. It's really strange. It's really kind of like obviously objectifying women and their role in our society, but it's real. You know, it happens a lot, and like some great actresses really struggle with it. One of them that comes to mind is Naomi Watts, who as a younger woman got all these amazing, wonderful parts, and she was in all these just awesome movies, and she's really struggled over the last 5-6 years to really get her foot back on the door with some good movies, and I hope Reese doesn't have the same problem. I don't think that she will, just because she seems like a very strong person and like probably wants to get into producing and maybe directing and stuff like that, so I think she'll probably go down that path. But as a movie star, it's not really there anymore. So Home Again's obviously not going to help with that. But that was number 8 this weekend. Home Again, only 1.7 million, 25 million overall. Number 9 this weekend was Till Death to Us Part, Thriller by Novus. Oh, okay. So Novus is the same group that did that kidnapping movie with Halle Berry. They're kind of a new person on the product, I feel like. Yeah. I think they did that other one with Halle Berry, maybe not. Taye Diggs, this is one of his movies. 1.5 million in 562 theaters. I don't really know what was going on with this one. It's basically a limited release, but it only did about $2,800 overall. Better than Battle of the Sexes. Oh, sorry, equal to Battle of the Sexes, or right the same per theater average. Hey, you can't complain about that, right? No, it's one of those weird one-off movies that's not going to go anywhere and it'll disappear pretty rapidly. Number 10 was Mother, 1.5 million. Per theater average was $793. Not good. 1,800 theaters. It's man, it feels like that movie's been out for like a year. It's only its third weekend. Total take so far is $16 million. Now there's a backlash to the backlash. I don't even want to talk about that movie anymore. I think I talked about it a lot. It's a failure on basically every level. Failure for Paramount, failure for Darren Aronofsky, failure for J-Law, Jennifer Lawrence. It was just ill-conceived idea from the start, and a bad product at the end of the day. Okay, so that's the top 10, folks. Like, I don't want to go too much deeper in anything. Let's see if anything sticks out here in limited releases. Not really. There's the Mark Felt documentary. Did terrible. Opened on 5 screens. It did 7,000 per screen. That's horrific. Any high per theater averages that I'm seeing? Not really. Take Every Wave, The Life of Laird Hamilton. Laird? Is that like a famous surfer? I probably should know that. Another documentary from IFC. Opened on one theater, 13,000. That's going nowhere. Nothing. It's surprising because it is October. Oh, you know what came out in limited release, or got expanded a little bit, was Victoria and Abdul. Focus features about Queen Victoria, and I believe her Indian sort of assistant, maybe, I want to say. Hopefully I'm not screwing that up. I saw the preview of the trailer. Doing surprisingly well, actually. Only in 77 screens. Added about 73 from last weekend. Per theater average is at 14,000. That's not awful. This one might stick around for a while and might do decently well. We'll see. I heard a lot of good buzz about it from random people. They're like, oh, this looks cool. I was like, what? I mean, I wouldn't want to see it because it looks super boring to me. I hate historical movies like that. I hate historical movies if they're done in that sort of historical drama way. Like, there's a whole field of this in my background, like literary criticism on the postmodernist side, that talks about how arts, especially movies and TV, view the past in this very sort of kitschy. It's not even nostalgia. It's different than nostalgia. It's sort of this kitschiness to the past. And I ever since learning that theory and looking at literature and art that way, it's like I can't unsee it, And so when I was watching Queen Victoria, the trailer to Queen Victoria and Abdul, I was just like, this looks so stupid. It's like, it was basically like a indie twee sort of vibe, just transported back to like whenever. And I was like, nah. Like, unless you're gonna treat the past like it was real and it actually happened, and it's not some like fever dream for indie cinema, like, I'm not into it. In any event, that one looks like it's doing pretty well. Also Stronger, that is the Jake Gyllenhaal movie about the Boston Marathon bomber. A guy loses his legs to the bombs. Doing okay, expanded a little bit. But I mean, when I say doing okay, I mean it's doing awful. Now that I look at that, per theater average is 1,500 on 645 screens. Like, that's done. I knew that one was done right when it opened. Friend Request is still out, surprisingly, in its second weekend. God, why did I feel like that came out like 3 weeks ago? 800,000, nice 60% drop. That's the sort of typical terrible horror movie drop, 60%. Per theater average is a horrific $384 per theater. That is trash. Okay, I think that's mostly it. Everything I really want to talk about in terms of the top 10, top 20, and limited releases. Let's talk a little bit about next week. I don't want to ruin it, though, because I'm going to do a midweek show probably on Wednesday night to talk about what is coming out this weekend. Okay, so Blade Runner 2049. A couple of weeks ago, it felt like, how is this really going to do? I think a lot of people were confused by it. The production budget got released, Then the PR stuff started to happen about 2 weeks ago, and it started to click a little bit more. Then the reviews started to drop this week, and things are starting to, like, I can feel this hype building around it. It's very long. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes. Obviously Ryan Gosling's in the lead. He's been all over the place. He hosted SNL last night. Him and Harrison Ford were on the Graham Norton show, and that's sort of a viral video right now going around. I have no idea what this is going to do. Tracking says about 40s, 45. I feel like it's going to go a lot higher than that. I feel like 50s is definitely it feels like a given right now to me, and maybe 60, 70. So we'll see. But we'll wait on that one to sort of do my official prediction middle of the week, see how it's feeling this week. But that's obviously going to be the biggest movie next weekend by far. Also opening is The Mountain Between Us. I don't know what Fox is doing with the marketing on this. Like, trailer was great. You got great actors in this. It should be great counter programming to Blade Runner. And Fox is dropping the ball with the marketing. I haven't seen anything on it, nothing on it in the last month, which makes zero sense. I don't know if Blade Runner is scaring them off or something, but like, I don't know. Like, it almost feels like there could be some Oscar buzz with some of this stuff, but maybe not. Maybe it's kind of like a trashy, middle brow romance film. My Little Pony's coming out. Don't care about that. Again, Lionsgate, they'll cheapen it up and not make a lot of money. And The Stray is coming out by Quality Flicks. Or is that a Christian movie? Probably. So that's what's coming out this weekend. It's going to be an interesting. Oh, and Victor and Abdul expands to 750 screens this weekend as well. So we'll keep an eye on that one, see how it's doing. Also, The Florida Project, which I'm really excited about. A24 is putting that out in limited release. Any other limited stuff that looks good? No, a lot of trashy stuff is coming out. Crazy. So we're into October, right? So it's going to be pedal to the metal all the way through January. Obviously we got Blade Runner this week. I just feel like Blade Runner is going to suck up, like it did at the beginning of September, is going to suck the air out of the sort of room. I think The Mountain Between Us is going to get hurt. My Little Pony is its own thing for children. But like The Foreigner, Happy Death Day are coming out next week. A couple of smaller films, Marshall and Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman. Annapurna's putting that one out. That one doesn't make any sense why they're putting that out. I feel like Blade Runner is just going to really suck up this weekend, next weekend. And the weekend after is very busy. You got Geostorm, you got The Snowman, a Michael Fassbender thriller, serial killer thriller. And then you got Boo 2, Medea Halloween, which I don't think is going to do very well. I don't know. I feel like Warner Brothers made a very good move putting Blade Runner out in the beginning of October, because I think it's just going to dominate the whole month. There's nothing else out here. Honestly, there's no huge movie coming out this month. Like, what the fuck? There's a lot of movies coming out, but they're all middle brow, or they're all mid-tier. I don't mean middle brow, mid-tier. Thank You for Your Service, Jigsaw, Suburbicon. These aren't $60 million movies opening at 60 or 50. Like, they're not going to do that. I can't think of any movie coming out besides Blade Runner that has a chance of breaking a $15 million opening, which is just nuts to me. It doesn't make any sense. You would think they would move up like one of those comic book movies into October. But Thor does open the first week of November. And then you got a lot more stuff coming out. Why is Bad Moms Christmas opening on November 1st? That doesn't make any sense. Then things really heat up in November. Sorry I'm going a little bit long, but I like to talk about this stuff. Thor starts out November. The next weekend is Daddy's Home 2, which I think will be really big because you got additional actors like John Lithgow involved now, instead of just Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg. Murder on the Orient Express, which should be, I think, massive, opens the same weekend. Then Justice League opens, and wow, I mean, those 2 weeks, November 3rd through the 17th, it's just going to be like one huge movie after the other. Then you have Coco opening up, Death Wish, Molly's Game. Man, it's nuts. absolutely nuts. And then it really kind of slows down, except for the limited release art films. It really slows down in December until you get to Star Wars. Basically, everything clears out for the first 2 weeks of Star Wars, and then The Last Jedi hits. All right, anyway, that's the show for today, guys. I'll be back midweek to talk about my official predictions for Blade Runner. Thanks for listening.